Hi everyone, back again for literacy narrative drafting. So you've already worked through your pre-writing process and now we have to start working toward a draft. And this process can go multiple ways. It really depends on what you prefer. So I'm just going to give you a couple of options and you can feel free to draft it ultimately however you want. But I know sometimes it's hard to even think about, like, do I just start writing and let it all flow and then go back and work on it? Or do I create an outline? It depends on you and your style. So I'm just going to share one approach. You do not have to follow this approach as long as you meet the assignment requirements, but I just want you to have something to start with. So Stephen King, we mentioned on writing that amateurs sit and wait for inspiration. The rest of us just get up and go to work. You got to put the pen to the paper. In this case, it might be typing on the document, whatever it is. I personally like to draft on paper, but maybe that seems silly to you because you ultimately have to type it. Whatever. Part of going through the composition process is learning what works best for you so that when you get to upper level college courses, because they're going to expect that There's not going to be this step-by-step process unless it's an elective creative writing class. So to start out, I want you to think about these 3/4 questions. And again, if we were face-to-face in a traditional classroom, we would sit down and write this as a journal entry. So if you want to do that and that's helpful to you, great. But ultimately, these things have to be included somewhere in the essay, so you might as well go ahead and draft them. So first, why is literacy even important? This would be a really great way to either start or end or both the literacy narrative. That's the so what, right? That's the so what, the main point or the argument, whether you explicitly state it or not, of this piece. Secondly, what effect can improving your literacy skills have on your future career? A lot of times when we're in college, it's you have to take all these classes that seem like they're just not going to matter. I know one of them that I took was astronomy. I have never used it for my career ever. Now, it was interesting. I learned a lot of new things. I'm fascinated with the sky, but it doesn't affect my daily life. Whereas my writing classes is what I do. It's what I do every day in some way, either professionally or personally. So I just can't imagine, not having had those experiences. What are your biggest strengths in reading, writing, and communicating, and your weaknesses? These are things you have to explore for a reflective piece. So we went through Stephen King's work, and we will be talking about that together. But he shared information about what factors influenced his literacy development, and he included a very specific personal anecdote about a teacher who influenced that. I want that to be part of what you talk about because those personal, specific details add to the narrative nature of this piece. Here are some, we've talked about these before a little bit, two of them anyway. And then there's another one that I'll mention. So chronological in order of time is really the one that makes the most sense to most people when they write a narrative of any kind. It's very linear. It makes sense. It goes from past to future, and it goes through time in an orderly, organized fashion. If that's the way your brain works, wonderful, do it. Sequential might be in just an order of events. So maybe you're thinking about, I learned to read, I learned to write, I learned to speak, I learned to communicate. If those are the way that you want to order, fine. But it seems to me like you're going to be still sort of overlapping with chronological since you're going to be examining all parts of your life. That would be kind of advanced if you found a way to do that together effectively. A thesis-driven organizational structure is what you're probably used to for a traditional argument, where you have sort of a generalized opening that ends with a clear stated thesis, and then you have examples that support that thesis. That isn't what this is. So I don't want you to choose the thesis-driven essay for this narrative. We're going to have plenty of other opportunities to use that. Another one that I didn't mention, is the non-linear, which I did explain. Now that one really takes some finesse. So if you'd like to try on your writing skills and play with it, this is a good time because you won't really be doing a non-linear essay organization for anything else that we do, except maybe your visual argument. So that would be where you don't start at the beginning, where you don't follow a step-by-step order. And it might include things like flashbacks or flash forwards. So if that's something you want to try on, feel free. You can actually look up nonlinear narratives and get some examples if you'd like to do that. But again, it's a little bit out there, so for some people. So if you are a little worried about this, I wouldn't pick that one, but don't be afraid of it either if you want to try it on. We've had some examples of literacy narratives so far. They didn't label them those, but they are examples because they share stories about their literacy journey, and they talk about the significance of them and the significance of literacy in their lives as adults, so that counts. We've already done some brainstorming and pre-writing, so now we're on the drafting stage. And here's a sample outline you could use. So you might use a chronological, straightforward chronological organizational structure. So you would start with the first memories of learning to read and write and speak and your literacy development. You will give detailed accounts of what you remember and who was involved and what kinds of texts or situations you remember. The same with middle school and your high school so far. And then your current state. So where are you now and where do you hope to go? That would really could be five paragraphs if you wanted to separate it out that way. Oh, we don't need that one. So that's just a possibility for the draft. If so, then you would have a minimum of 4 paragraphs for your draft. The requirement is 1 full page, but the more that you write now, the more feedback you will get from your peers, and the less you will have to do to polish it. So I encourage you to try and write the whole thing, regardless of what the minimum requirement is.